Hello, ethics class. Hope that you are doing well. And here we are. Good morning to you. I'm sitting here by a lovely fireplace here because it's a little bit cold this morning, or mostly just because I'm cold all the time. Um, but I want to jump in our lecture for the week. And this week we're going to go backwards, actually. The last couple of chapters are animal rights and affirmative action, and we're going to talk about a couple of those things. But I always say this: if we have time, I go back and do it. If we don't, I think one year we kind of squeezed it in really quickly. But I want to talk this week about genes and cloning. This is something that is not um, my definite area of expertise, but it is something that I find pretty interesting, and so I wanted to share a little bit with you, and we'll talk through some kind of neat ideas in this, and also some, uh, quite honestly, some dangerous ideas too. So we kind of have to temper both of those. To start with, let's do some definitions today. A genome is your complete set of DNA. So everything that makes you you from a genetic standpoint is your genome, all of those things. Now, we'll talk about um, that in a minute because I defined that carefully. I didn't say everything that makes you who you are, but everything genetically that contributes to that. And the reason being, I want to talk about that here in just a minute. A gene is a discrete section of that code. So a small part of the genome is a gene. And then a chromosome is one of 46 molecules that contain the genes. So if you look at this slide, as you go from top to bottom, it gets smaller and smaller. And as you go the other way, it builds on itself. So chromosomes are parts of genes, and genes are parts of the genome. And your genome is the totality of everything from a genetic standpoint that helps to inform who you are and give you a lot of the characteristics and things that make up your being, both physically and in some other ways as well. Now, this slide is where you need to really kind of zero in on a couple of ideas. We have therapy, enhancement, and engineering. Gene therapy is an experimental technique for directly changing a person's genes to prevent or treat a disease. Almost anyone that you find would be okay with some level of genetic therapy. If we can give you a gene that would keep you from getting a certain disease or help you to uh, combat a disease like MS or Lou Gehrig's or something to that effect, if we could go in and on the genetic level help someone who's suffering with that, I think most people would be okay, provided we can do that in a responsible way, and we can do that in a way that doesn't harm we don't want to use embryonic stem cells, maybe. And we'll talk about that later, and I'll let you kind of come to a conclusion there, but you have to kind of weigh those out. Now, the other two, genetic enhancement, is a big slippery slope, problematic area. Genetic enhancement is intervention to make people better than normal, to give them maximum intelligence or maximum athletic ability, or maximum good looks, as a person determines that, eye color, hair color, that sort of thing. That's when we get into that, you're, like I say, that's Darwinian, that's dangerous pretty quickly. And then genetic engineering, direct intervention in organism's genome to enhance traits. That is taking someone and trying to breed a super race of people or kind of whatever. And of course, you can obviously see the problems there. So those are some definitions to kind of get our discussion started here. Cloning is the production of a genetically identical copy of an existing biological entity through an asexual process, meaning so not having identical twins without parents being involved in the process. Now, the reason a minute ago I said that your genes inform who you are is we know twins, identical twins, who are identical from a genetic standpoint, but they're not the same people. They like and dislike certain things. Their personalities can be measuredly different. They can have different enjoyments, and there's lots of things about them that can be different, even though genetically they are exactly the same. This came up in our study of homosexuality in that chapter, and we talked about the desire for people to find the gay gene if it existed, where one of the two twins would be homosexual, the other would not, and they would be again the same genetically. So there's no gene for that per se. And then reproductive cloning, the genetic duplication of a fully developed animal or human. Again, we'll talk more about that later. I think that definition is pretty self-explanatory. Why would anyone want to use this? For some who can't perhaps have children, they could take some of their genes and go into a laboratory and clone or make someone who is at least genetically related to them. If I had the ability perhaps to say, okay, I want to have my own kids and I don't want them to have Crohn's disease, because that is a genetic, best we can tell, that's a genetic disorder. We don't know a ton about Crohn's. Let's say you lose a loved one and you could reproduce them. You could make someone who is genetically identical to someone who's passed on, and you still want them. If I could bring my dad, someone genetically identical to my father, and have him here to know my children. Or, this is very Brave New World sort of thing, but let's say I have a spare Billy somewhere where if I ever need an organ transplant, I have someone who I know is a match for me. And it is not out of the realm of possibility to think that rich folks that have the means could do things like that if this technology became widely available. So you can see, even though on this slide there are some things that you read and say, wow, that would be really cool, then you immediately, if you start kind of ticking down the boxes, okay, where would this lead to? It could be some really, really dangerous places, okay? And so that's what I want you to do for today. Real simple assignment. Just want to have you interact with the material a little bit. So I want you to share with me on Google Classroom kind of a page of just what we've talked about so far with those 3 or 4 slides, the positives and the negatives you could see for cloning as it relates to so far, okay? So that's where I want you to start. Turn that in on Google Classroom again today, and we'll continue through this on Friday and Monday. We'll just go a little slowly here the next few days and keep forging ahead. All right. Love you guys. Hope you're having a good and godly day.